What's going on, everybody? My name is Leon Edwards, and you're tuned in to the very first episode of the Somethin About Sports Podcast. This is very exciting and also nerve-wracking for me. I've never done anything like this before, but I love sports and I love talking sports, so I thought this would be a great thing to kind of bring this to other people who are passionate about talking sports and like hearing about sports and current events going on in them. I am from Kansas City, Kansas. So pretty much I'm a local guy. I love all my local teams, of course, the Chiefs, the Royals, big KU fan, finished school there and different things like that. So you'll hear me talk a lot about our local teams. Kind of going into why I made a podcast from before. I just wanted to have a platform where I could talk about sports, get my thoughts on sports. It's something I'm passionate about. I love them and I have conversations about them every day. So why not record it and put it out to the world? So you guys have to let me know what you think as well. Kind of the way that this podcast is going to go is I want to get into talking about current sporting events that are going on nationally, stories that are going on in sports, things that stand out to me that I think are interesting. And at the end of every episode, I'll kind of take a time to get into my local teams, get into the teams that I like following. So you guys will know once that ending comes around for you guys that aren't in the Kansas City area or Kansas or Missouri area, you guys know you can tune out. Or if you want to hear about our local teams or you like listening to me talk enough, then definitely hang out and hear about our local teams as well. But again, I thank you for listening. I welcome you guys in on this journey with me. And I look forward to continue moving this forward. So first off, of course, it's March Madness. So by the time you guys hear this, we'll already know the results of all the first four games. But I wanted to hop in and talk about that. This is my favorite sporting event every year, bar none. By far my favorite sporting event. I just love the stories. I love how many games there are. I love sitting around and watching games in the middle of the day when I'm supposed to be working. If any of my coworkers or my boss hears this, I actually am working. But anyway, I kind of want to get into some thoughts, general thoughts I have on the NCAA tournament, kind of go into a region by region analysis and what I think about each region, what some possible upsets are, what I think about some of these teams. And then I'll get into the last region, the West region, which includes KU. And then I'll talk about KU and kind of what I think their outlook is for the tournament. And then that'll be what we do for this first one. We'll just do a March Madness edition and we'll kind of keep hopping into March Madness. I think tomorrow I'll probably bring a little bit more of other current events and things like that. But I think March Madness is enough to fill a podcast, at least for the first episode. So let's jump right into it. I guess the first thing I have to say about this is that probably like just about everybody else who loves college basketball, I'm just happy that it's here. I'm happy that the games have started. I'm happy that, we're able to actually watch this. So I want to thank everybody who had a hand in getting that put together and everybody who had a hand in making sure we had this opportunity to watch this. Shout out to the players, man. They've been going through a lot this year with quarantining and going through the protocols and testing all the time. So shout out to them. Special shout out one of my best friends. He's actually been in the grind as well as a coach. So I've kind of had a little bit of inside knowledge on what that's looked like for people. And I know it's been pretty rigorous for all of them. So we appreciate all you guys for putting that work in for us people who are just fans that want to spectate and fill out brackets and have conversations about this. We know you guys love it too. So I just want to throw that out there. We got to appreciate these guys and we got to really put in perspective what they're going through for our entertainment. So I appreciate that. One of my main thoughts about the NCAA tournament this year is that I feel like the NCAA missed a golden opportunity that they'll probably only have this once to come up with some cool names for the regions. When I saw a bracket coming out, I'm like, everybody's in a bubble. Everybody's in the same place in the Indiana area. So why not have different names for the regions instead of just the directional names, because everybody's in the Midwest. Everybody's in the same place. You could have came up with a Cinderella region or, a busted bracket region or, different names like that. Big dance region, March Madness region. I think that would have been a cool thing or a cool touch just to kind of mark this year in history for the year that we're having. And the things that we've gone through. And that would be a cool way to mark this year in history. Look back on these brackets and realize like, hey, there was no East, Midwest, Southwest, because everybody was in the same place. I thought that would have been a cool way to kind of hold this tournament's place in history, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said before, I'm just happy it's happening. So that's number one. I'm just happy that we're here and it's happening. So I guess without further ado, let's hop into some of these regions. I guess I'll look at the South region first. I want to do the West region last because, for one, I mean, we all kind of know who we're going to predict coming out of that region with Gonzaga over there, the overwhelming favorite, but also KU's in that region. So that'll be a good transition for me to kind of hop into talking about KU's first game, and you guys that are going to want to hop off that might not like KU or that just might not be familiar or care that much. I'll give you guys an opportunity to hop off and hear everything else. So first off, I want to start off in the South, where Baylor's the number one, which I think Baylor's a really, really good team. I still don't think they're on the level of Gonzaga. I do think it'll probably be tough for them to not make it out of this region, but I see a lot more traps in their region than I do in Gonzaga's for sure. So I'll say when I go through each region, I'll give a thought on the number one seed, what I think about the number one seed. I'll give a thought on probably who I think is the most likely Cinderella type team that could come out, and then probably the upset that I'll predict in each one. Usually every region has one, so I'll predict an upset in each region as well, and then we'll keep moving through them. I would say Baylor with that second round game, they probably have the toughest draw with North Carolina and Wisconsin. You know, both of those programs, they're going to come out playing with pride. They're going to come out and smack you in the mouth. They're going to come out and play hard. They got great coaches. They got great culture. They're going to come out and show that in that game. So whoever comes out of that game will be really tough for Baylor, and I think they'll give them a run for their money. I think if there was a one seed that was going to lose before the Sweet 16 between Baylor and maybe Michigan, but I probably still say I think Baylor's probably the most likely. Those are two tough teams, and I know they're not having great years, but Roy's a heck of a coach, and Wisconsin plays a heck of a defense. I know their resume is not quite where it normally is. They don't really have a whole lot of big wins, and they don't have a whole lot of bad losses either. So, you know, you don't really know what to fully make of them, but you know one thing is that they're going to defend like crazy. That's what Wisconsin does. That's what they're doing this year. North Carolina, on the other hand, is a little bit different. They've been kind of up and down on the defensive end. And, you know, sometimes that's kind of part of Roy's reputation. A lot of people kind of give Roy crap for that. His teams don't always defend that great. So I think that's a big one. But they do have a crazy front line. I think they've got like 4 guys in that front line rotation that they can go through. Garrison Brooks, Armando Bacot. And then I know they got a couple of younger guys as well. I believe is it Wills or Willis? Their freshman kid who's pretty good as well. I know they've got some bodies up there. Their backcourt's not as strong as you would like to see, but they do have some people that can play. They've got some people that are going to come out and play hard, and they've proved that. They proved that, you know, through the ACC tournament. They've proved that, you know, recently down the stretch of the season, they could have kind of mailed it in. So I really like the winner of that game to give Baylor a challenge. I think that second round game, that round of 32 game between Baylor and or North Carolina or Wisconsin, I think is going to be a really tough one. If I had to pick that game, I'm probably picking Carolina. Some of it's going to be off of the name, but I also think that front court is going to be overwhelming for most teams out there. You know, a team's going to have an overwhelming backcourt to get them, and that's why I think Baylor eventually will prevail over North Carolina, because their backcourt is so good. They'll be able to take advantage of North Carolina's weak backcourt, but I do think that North Carolina will give them a tough game, and that'll be a real tough challenge for Baylor. And I say between them and Michigan, I see this is probably one of the more likely one seeds to not make it to the second weekend. So let's keep moving down the bracket. You got that vaunted 5-12 with Villanova and Winthrop. This is like the perfect upset choice for everybody because of how Villanova's played these last few games without Gillespie, and then Winthrop just being such a good team in their own right. And you don't want to take anything away from them. It's not just going to be about Villanova's shortcomings, but it's also going to be about how good of a team they are as well. I do personally think that Villanova's just they're becoming one of those teams that when they get to the tournament, they're gonna make some noise. They're gonna win some games. Jay Wright's proving that to me. And especially as a KU fan, for sure, I know about Jay Wright a lot more than probably some other fan bases as well. It's hard to bet against them. I see Villanova coming out of that game, but I don't fault anybody for picking Winthrop in that one. That's probably one of the easier upset choices. I don't see Villanova making a patented deep run this year without Gillespie, but I do see them getting out of that game. Purdue, North Texas. North Texas actually wasn't even, a top team in their conference. They kind of got hot at the right time. I think they'll probably run into a decent sized buzzsaw with Purdue. Purdue's got some good size. They got some decent guards. They've played really good down the stretch as well. I really, really like their big guy, Travion. I believe his last name is Williams. And again, guys, this is just kind of my thoughts. This is an opinion podcast, kind of going back to just some different things about it. So I don't know everything about every team, but I do kind of follow as much as I can. I watch as much sports as I possibly can with, my two rascals and all of that. So, but Travion, Williams is his last name. I really like that kid. I think he's good. I think he can overwhelm some people on that North Texas team, and they'll probably get out of there as well. So far, I've been looking kind of chalky, but I definitely will have some upsets I pick eventually. Probably not now, but eventually. Next up, we got this Texas Tech, Utah State. Texas Tech is a good team, really, really good team. I don't know if they're a great team, though. I think they played everybody tough in the Big 12. They didn't beat a whole lot of top-tier teams this year. I could see Utah State giving them some trouble, but Texas Tech has really, really battle-tested. Pretty much every game they've played this year in the Big 12 has been tough. Big 10's also a similar way with that. I think they do get out of that game. But I do know that Utah State, they're going to come to play. That's a really good team. They've actually been really good for a while now. They're building a really good program there as well. Keita, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. I've watched him play a few times. He's a load inside. I believe he's a 7-footer. He's a big guy, defensive stalwart. He's going to give them some issues. Texas Tech actually isn't that big of a team, so they'll probably try to stretch him out a little bit. But I do think that Keita is going to give them some issues inside. Texas Tech will probably have to play through their guards a decent amount, Mac McClung and those guys, Shannon, and do some damage that way. But I see them getting out of there. This Arkansas-Colgate game, I think this is the one. This might be my first upset pick. I know there will be a 14-3. Colgate's kind of like a mystery right now. They didn't play a whole lot of games. They're ranked in a weird place in the net. They are a good team. They do have some good players, but, a lot of people are kind of, since the net's not fully trusted right now, a lot of people are kind of discrediting them a little bit. A lot of people don't think they're that great of a team. They play a lot of players, and they do a good job. I believe if I remember right, I did look at Colgate's metrics and kind of take a look at what they were doing. I believe they go about 9 or 10 deep. And I think they have actually a top offensive and defensive rating. But I wanna fact check that. But I do believe Colgate was a team, when I looked at their metrics, they were one in the top 40 or 50 in offensive and defensive efficiency. I think this is actually a prime upset pick. I'm not fully sold on Arkansas. I do like Moses Moody. I do think he's a really good player. But I never was overwhelmed when I watched them. And in their best win, also kind of down the stretch, had some questionable officiating. They got a lot of hometown calls. So I think that win probably has not an asterisk next to it. They won the game, but I do know that they got a little bit of home cooking in that one as well, in that rivalry game against Alabama. I remember watching that game down the stretch. So I do think that Colgate is actually probably a good team. They're probably better than people try to discredit them. They're not as good as number 9 in the net. Just from a talent perspective, a lot of the Power 5 conferences are going to have more talent on that. But I do think they are a good team. I do think they're going to give Arkansas a run for their money, and this is probably going to be the first big upset that I pick, actually. I actually For some reason, maybe it's because, I like toothpaste or I like keeping dental hygiene up. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's the name that's driving me there. But something's been telling me, giving me a gut feeling about this team and what I think about them. So I think they'll do good. All right, let's see here to the next matchup. Florida, Virginia Tech. So this one's actually a pretty tough one to pick, which, we kind of see that a decent amount from these 7-10 matchups. They actually usually are closer than 3 seeds apart. They're pretty close to the 8-9s. 8-9s are usually pretty evenly matched as well. Sometimes you do see kind of those smaller schools creep up on that 9 line or that 8 line. Kind of this year we see that with St. Bonnie's, and we also see that with Loyola, both really, really good teams. And so you do see that kind of in the 8-9 sometimes. And then you see a Virginia Tech type of team slip to the 10 line. I actually like Virginia Tech's team. I think that they've done a good job this year in the ACC. They're pretty battle tested. I like Florida as well. Florida's got a really, really good freshman. Let me think of what his name is. I remember watching him play. Let me try to get his name. Let me see if his name will come to me. And if not, I'll look it up here real quick. But they've got a really, really good freshman. Trey Mann, I believe is his name. And I think he's a freshman or a sophomore. He's a younger kid. I know that for a fact. Let's find out what class he is. Yeah, he's a sophomore. Okay, so I knew he was an underclassman. They talked a lot about that when I watched them play a few times this year. He's come along really nicely throughout this season and from last season. But I do like Virginia Tech. I like the way that they play. They shoot a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. And then they also have a really good defensive identity as well. I think I saw a stat somewhere where they're like undefeated when they hold teams under 70 or something like that. So I can see this being a little bit of a slugfest, but I do like Virginia Tech to come out of this matchup. I know Florida's been kind of trying to catch up and get their feet under them ever since they lost Keontae Johnson. Prayers up to him, prayers to his family. I know he's kind of seemed like he's getting back in the swing of things as well. Hopefully we get to see him back out on the court soon. So prayers to him. Kind of in a side note, I know they've been kind of trying to refine their identity. That Keontae was the preseason player of the year actually in the SEC. So that kid's a really, really good player. Hope to see him back, but I think they've been kind of trying to figure it out since. And I do like Mike White as a coach. I do like Florida's program, but I think that Virginia Tech's going to pull that one out. I'm into this 2-15. So the 2-15 matchup is something that I guess since we're here on Ohio State and Oral Roberts, just kind of want to talk on the 2-15 matchup in general and kind of what I think about it. So every year when I'm filling out a serious bracket, the 2-15 matchup is probably one of the matchups that gives me the most trouble with trying to pick them because the 2 seeds are generally a lot better than the 15 seeds. But in recent memory, we've been seeing a lot of 15 seeds give 2 seeds problems. And it's not every year. It's not every year we see an upset either. But I do know in recent memory, we've had a handful of close games between those teams. And we've had a handful of upsets as well. So I always try to analyze those matchups, see kind of what variables are at play in those matchups. And see, which 2-15 matchup is probably the most likely. When I pick them in my bracket, most of the time I end up going with the 2 seed just because I think that the 2 seeds are always just so much more talented. But I think Oral Roberts is a really good team with a really, really great player. They do have one great player that can score in bunches. I think he averages like 24, 25 points a game, if I'm not mistaken. Max Abmas, and then Kevin Obenar as well. They combine for almost 43 points a game. So they do have some guys that can play. They shoot a lot of 3-pointers, which is a recipe for success in a tournament. And then they also make their free throws as well when they get to the line. So Ohio State's been a little inconsistent this year. They did play really, really well down the stretch and in the Big Ten tournament. I think they gave that game to Illinois, actually. They should have won that game down the stretch in that Big Ten championship. Either way, though, they've got some really good players. I really like Washington. I really like E.J. Liddell as well. I like him as a stretch big. He can really do some good things. I think that Ohio State eventually does prevail in this game. But I could see a path where Oral Roberts could make it interesting, or at least hang in there, till halfway through the first half, make people start to think or ask questions about it. But I don't see this one as the 215 that's the most likely upset this year. And I'll get into that later, into what 215 matchup I think is the most likely upset this year. So coming out of this bracket, I think I'm going to pick Ohio State probably to eventually make it to the Final Four. And that's not because I think they're a better team than Baylor. I just have watched Baylor a decent amount down the stretch. I don't think they're the same team that they were from the beginning of the season. And I also think that if they had played that whole time, they probably would have gotten proven to not be as great as we thought they were. There are some different things that, I think about Baylor's team. I really think they have a lot of good players. I think they have a lot of good talent, but I don't think that sometimes they get into enough sets and games and run offense, manufacture buckets. A lot of times they get into a lot of ISO ball. They get into relying on the threes a lot. The only thing about Baylor, though, is that they can play defense with the best of them. So they'll never be out of a game. They'll always make pretty much every game close because they play defense. They lock in. They know how to play the right way, and they got some really good and really prideful players. So I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor got out of this bracket, but I think they're going to slip up somewhere. I have a feeling, not every 1C is going to make the Final Four. It's very rare that it happens. And I think, like I said before, Baylor and Michigan were the two most likely that I could see maybe falling even before the second weekend. And they're the two most likely that I could see falling before the Final Four. Michigan more so because of the Isaiah Livers injury and kind of the limbo with that and not knowing when he'll be back. But also that they've shown some vulnerability lately as well, just in general, even before Livers kind of went down, but especially since he did go down. So I think that Ohio State eventually prevails out of here. I would say if there was going to be a surprise team that came out of this bracket, I'd probably have to pick Texas Tech. Could be a surprise team to where I wouldn't consider Texas Tech a Cinderella. They're a major conference team. They were just in the last championship game that we had. I think that works to their advantage. I think Chris Beard's a great coach, and they play defense, and they turn every game into a fight. They turn every game into a street fight. So I can see them fighting their way out of this bracket as well. If I had to pick a likely Cinderella out of this bracket, that's a tough one because I think there are some tough matchups for those Cinderella teams there. I'd have to say maybe if with the way Utah State plays defense, if Utah State were to be able to beat Texas Tech, I could see them kind of doing the same thing I described with Texas Tech. They play great defense. They have a huge defensive anchor inside, a 7-footer. I could see them maybe winning a couple of games and making it out. Or even Winthrop. Winthrop could get hot. That's a one-loss team. They know they're a good team. They could, get that win over Villanova, gain some confidence, and make a run. So those are probably the three teams to watch that a lot of people aren't saying could make it to the Final Four. Texas Tech, Winthrop, and Utah State. That Texas Tech-Utah State game, I think, is actually pretty important. Whoever wins that game, I think, makes it to the Sweet 16 at least. And then after that, you kind of have to see what happens. But I do like the winner of that game to make a little noise in this region and mess it up a little bit and cause some chaos. So that's the South region. Let's hop over to the Midwest. This region, it'll probably be a few upsets that I pick, but as far as the Final Four, it's probably going to be chalky. I really, really like Illinois as a team. I like what they can do. They're kind of just like that traditional college team that can just win any way that they need to win. They play defense. They play hard. They've got a star on the outside. They got a star on the inside. And then they got some really, really good complementary players. So I really like that Illinois team. I think if at the moment with the way that they're playing, if anybody was going to give Gonzaga a run in this tournament, it'd probably be them. So I do like that team. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit because there are, other games in this bracket that I think, could eventually determine Illinois' fate. I don't think Illinois is a perfect team, and there are going to be some 1Cs that don't make it. But if I had to pick, I'd pretty much say Illinois is coming out of this bracket. But we can kind of get into some of these other matchups as well. So Illinois Drexel, I think Illinois pretty much dominates that game. I don't see any path. Honestly, this year, I really don't see any path where a 16 seed is going to give a 1 seed any issues. I think all the 1 seeds are going to get out of the first round no sweat. Of course, I'll say that, and then, I'll come back, Sunday or Monday, and a 1 seed will be going home. But that's just how March goes. But I don't anticipate it, so we'll see how that goes. And then that 8-9 matchup. So Loyola Chicago versus Georgia Tech. I really like Loyola as a team. They've been here before. Technically, they were just in the Final Four a few years back. I think that's a good team. I think that's a good program that they're building there, and they can play. I think Loyola gets out of that game. I really hate that this has to be that Loyola had to be an 8 seed and they have to play Illinois in the second round. I could really see Loyola in a different spot making some noise, even on the 7 line. Even if they were one more seed up, I think they warrant that. That's a really good team. I think their numbers said they were probably a little bit better than the 8 seed. But, that's kind of how the draw goes. And, when you play in the Missouri Valley, sometimes that's kind of how you get hit with those seed numbers. So, but I do see them as a really good team. I do think that they could give Illinois at least a game. Do I anticipate it? I would say probably not. I think Illinois probably ends up winning by double digits. I just think they're a load, man. They got a good team. But Loyola's probably the most likely out of those two, between Georgia Tech and Loyola, to make it happen. Georgia Tech had a really good run to the ACC championship. They did get to avoid having to play Virginia. Who knows what would have happened in that game? But either way, they did their job. They got the job done, beating a really good Florida State team that's pretty much been one of the top teams in that ACC for a while. Kind of another tangent here. The ACC's been kind of weird. We talk a lot nationally about Duke. We talk a lot nationally about North Carolina, Syracuse, the big brands in the league. But Virginia and Florida State have pretty much been owning that league for a little while now. Both of those are really good programs. They got really good coaches. Virginia just validated their run with the national championship. I really want to see Leonard Hamilton at some point make it to a Final Four. I think he's done a really good job there at Florida State. I think he's built something great. I think he'll get there sooner than later, but he's built something great there as well. And they've been kind of running that league. So that's a little tangent there, but kind of back to this Midwest region. I do see Loyola coming out over Georgia Tech, kind of moving to that 5-12 matchup. That vaunted 5-12 matchup we talk about so much. You have to pick at least one or two of those. Oregon State's hot right now. I've watched them play a few times this year. I just don't believe in them as a team. I do like Tinkle as a coach. I think he's done some good things since he's been at Oregon State, but I don't believe in him. And honestly, this is probably more about my disbelief in Oregon State than it is about my belief in Tennessee, because I really don't believe in Tennessee either. They don't really impress me that much. I just don't think they're going to lose to Oregon State. They got a lot of talent on that Tennessee team. I think they got 2 guys that'll probably be first rounders and probably a third that'll at least be a draft pick on Tennessee's team. So they do have some really good players on that team. I think the talent will at least prevail in that one. Oregon State may give them a run just because they are hot. Oregon State's a really hot team right now coming off of that Pac-12 championship. But I just don't see them winning. I think Tennessee's going to take care of business. That 13-4 Oklahoma State Liberty. Liberty's kind of another one of those teams. They've been building something there. They've been in the tournament. They've been winning their league pretty frequently. They've been doing a good job there. And that's a good team. First place in the Atlantic Sun. 5 losses this year. But I really, really like Cade Cunningham. I really like what Oklahoma State is doing right now. Even outside of Cade Cunningham, I just think that's a really good team. I think it's an underrated team. I think they probably could have ended up on the 3 line. If they would have beat Texas in that Big 12 championship, I guarantee they probably would have been on the 3 line. But I think even without that win, I think they probably should have been on the 3 line. They've done a lot of good things, and they've just been really, really hot down the stretch. Oklahoma State's a team that I can see making a run as well. I really like them as a team. I really like what they've put together. Shout out to Mike Boyden. Not a lot of people knew who he was before he got to Oklahoma State, but we learned real quick that he's a force to be reckoned with. So that team's playing really well. I like Cade Cunningham. I like Avery Anderson. They've got the Boone brothers on that team that are also pretty good. So that's a good team. That's a good team to watch. For those of you guys that, if you want to kind of be a contrarian and pick another, decent number seed to come out of this bracket, Oklahoma State's a great candidate for that. I actually think they're a little bit better team than West Virginia is. If I'm being honest with you, I would have been okay with those 2 teams being switched. Not to say West Virginia is not a good team, but I think Oklahoma State's a little bit better. And if they had another chance to play them, I think they would beat them again. They've beaten them twice in a row now, actually. So I think that's a good team. So obviously I'm taking them in that game over Liberty. San Diego State and Syracuse. This one's a tough one, and probably more so because of kind of what Syracuse did the last time. I think they were a 10 seed the last time they made that run to the Final Four, but it's hard to bet against Boeheim. Two Boeheims this year. You got Jim, and then you got Buddy, who's just stroking the lights out from three. He's doing his thing, for his dad's team, putting up 30 balls and just killing it so far. So it's hard to bet against Boeheims. But San Diego State's also a really, really good team, and they've been they put together 2 nice seasons. I think they were one of the last undefeated teams in the country last year, if I'm not mistaken. I think they were one of the last undefeated teams in the country. I think that they're building something, and I think that that's a good program. The Mountain West Conference has kind of been a conference that they've run through for a few years now. I like Mitchell on that team. He can fill up the stat sheet, especially the buckets. He can get some buckets. They've got a good big, a good rebounding big, Nate Mensah. I think this is a good team. I just don't know if I can bet against Boeheim. I think if I had to pick it, and probably in a lot of my brackets, if I go back and look, I pick Syracuse in this most of the time. It's just tough to pick against Syracuse this time of year. I'm probably being a little bit biased to the brand a little bit, but I've watched them play down the stretch. I think they look really good. And, when you get these Hall of Fame coaches in these 1-2 game sample sizes where they get an opportunity to show their prowess as a coach, they can do some good things, especially with that zone Syracuse likes to run, especially with a lot more time this year, to kind of prepare. Teams are holed up. I think the coaching cream is going to rise to the top in this tournament as well, just because these guys are holed up in their rooms, not able to do a lot of extracurriculars. They're in a bubble. They're not able to do a lot. And I think that's going to help these great coaches, these coaches that know how to come up with schemes and beat teams. This is going to help those teams. So I'm going to pick that upset. I'm going to pick that 11-6 upset with Syracuse over San Diego State. Wouldn't be surprised if San Diego State won that game. Like I said before, they've been building there for a while now. They put a lot of good players out, but I like Syracuse in that one. As far as West Virginia and Morehead State, West Virginia is a good team. They're a little inconsistent. I know a lot of people probably, when they hear about West Virginia, they think Press Virginia, the defensive stalwart, but this is actually a scoring team. This is a team with some guys that can fill it up in a hurry. They got a good guard, Deuce McBride. They got a good big, and Derek Culver. They've been a little inconsistent down the stretch. They've proven that they have some weaknesses. They don't always shoot with consistency. They don't always play very good defense, but it's a good enough team, a battle-tested enough team that I think they'll be fine against Morehead State. I don't anticipate the 14-3 upset there. I will have one that I pick probably as at least a likely upset. I don't think that the West Virginia Morehead State upset is pretty likely. So let's move on to Clemson and Rutgers. I will admit, I have roots in South Carolina. I have family that's gone to South Carolina. My dad's from South Carolina, so Clemson, not family that's going to South Carolina, family that's going to Clemson, sorry. I have family that's going to Clemson. Clemson kind of near and dear to my heart. They started the season hot. I did get to watch them a couple of times. Eye test really wasn't that great for me. Rutgers, I think eye test wise, from watching them a few times as well this year in that Big Ten, I think they're battle tested. They played a lot of really good teams. I don't think a team can step on the court with a Big Ten team or even a Big 12 team for that matter that those teams haven't seen a team as good as or better this year. Those were 2 tough conferences. So I think Rutgers pulls this one out. I think they're a good team. I think they have a lot going for them. So I think Rutgers wins this one. They've been building as well. They finished the season really strong last year. They're starting this season. Coming into this season, I think they're going to at least get an NCAA tournament win to validate that as well. So I take Rutgers in that one. Houston and Cleveland State. So I guess I need to preface this by saying I'm not a huge believer in Houston. They defend aggressively. I really like Kelvin Sampson as a coach. I know that they can score. I know that they can defend. But for them to be so highly ranked, and they didn't even win their conference this year, Wichita State actually actually took that American Conference this year, which they've quietly been building as well. They've quietly become, one of those pretty consistent teams. I think a lot of people who don't watch college basketball on a regular basis, that only watch the tournament, they probably think the same of Wichita State. They're always there. They're always, kind of in the national spotlight. And even this year, with the whole Greg Marshall incident and everything that happened with that, I mean, they're still around. So that for them to win the American this year is pretty big deal. But as far as this Houston-Cleveland State game, like I said before, I probably won't actually pick a 15 over 2, and I don't think this is the most likely one to happen. But I also don't see Houston going too far. I think they will make the second weekend just by default. I don't think Rutgers or Clemson is good enough to knock them off early. They got some good players on Houston, but I just don't believe in them as a team, as an actual title contender. That for one, they don't have a lot of great wins. I think one of their better wins was Texas Tech early on in the season. And like I said before, Texas Tech's a good team. I don't really think they're a great team. So I do think Houston's pretty good. I do think that they have a culture now. Kelvin Sampson has built a culture there. They're always there. They're always good. So I'm not taking anything away from them. Just from eye test wise, I mean, if you look at every other 1 and 2 seed in this tournament and you watch Houston play, I just don't know if they're on that same level right now. And that's not, taken away from anybody on that team or anything like that. But I like Sampson as a coach. I think he can coach them out of the first weekend. I think they can win some games in this tournament. I just don't see him as a legit title contender. I wanted to throw that out there. So I do think Houston wins that game. So kind of just moving through this, I do think Illinois comes out of this bracket. I think I made that pretty clear at the beginning of talking about this bracket. I do think Illinois makes it out of this one. I like them a lot. I like them as a title contender. I think that they have a tough go in that 8-9 matchup. Loyola, I think, wins that game against Georgia Tech. I think Loyola could give them some trouble, but I do like Loyola. I do like Loyola as a team, but I like Illinois to come out of this one. I would say if I had to make a surprise pick on a team to come out of this one, I kind of talked them up a little bit. I think Oklahoma State can make a run in this. They're going to have the best player on the floor pretty much every game. Unless they play Illinois, I do think I think is just about as good. I think K's a lot more skilled. I think he's a better scorer, but I think Io affects the game a lot more. So I think, in that game, they could probably cancel each other out, but I still think K's a little bit better player. I could see them making a run through this. I would say if there had to be a Cinderella pick, and I don't know if you can call him a Cinderella pick, and again, I probably already kind of gave this away, but I probably pick Syracuse. Syracuse is a big brand. A lot of teams probably coming out playing against Syracuse in the tournament. They know that. That's something that seeps in, I believe, in their head. But I also just like Boeheim as a coach. He knows how to win in the tournament. He knows how to win small sample size games. And then they've got shooting right now. They're hot. They're playing good at the right time of the season. So they probably have a chip on their shoulder from being an 11 seed and, people doubting them, even though, they are Syracuse and they do have a high pedigree. So I think they'll come out and play with pride. And, I think they're probably a good pick for a Cinderella. I would say my most likely upset pick in this region. This is a tough one because Syracuse is kind of that 11 seed range. It's hard to say that they're a Cinderella or an upset, but that's what the numbers say for Syracuse. So I'd have to go with that. I say the most shocking upset I could see is Loyola over Illinois. I just don't see it happening, but that'd probably be the most shocking one I can see coming out of this region. I do pick Illinois to go. I think Oklahoma State is right there with them. I think Oklahoma State makes a run until they run into Illinois, and then I do think Illinois will eventually knock them out. But I do like those two teams coming out of this, and I think if they were to beat Illinois, I see Oklahoma State in the Final Four. So that kind of gives away the Midwest region. And so we'll go ahead and move on to the East region next. All right, so starting with the East region, I think this region probably has the most potential to go haywire. Every year we always have that one region that it's just an absolute chaos bracket. A lot of things go crazy. And I think I attribute some of that to Isaiah Livers being out, but then also just some of these matchups. I think there's some good matchups here. I think there's some tough draws for some teams here as well. So I see this one as probably the highest potential to kind of be a crazy one if you look back on it. So I guess let's just work through some of these games as well, and I'll give you guys an idea of what I think going through this bracket. So when you look at Michigan, Texas Southern, shout out to Texas Southern for winning that game for the SWAC. Cool to see a HBCU team get a win in the tournament. So shout out to them. I do think their road ends after they play Michigan, even without Livers. Michigan's still a really good team. They got a lot of talent on that team. I don't anticipate them having any issues with Texas Southern. I mean, even if any of you guys watched that game, that Texas Southern game today, I mean, it was a struggle for them to even score baskets. So, and the way Michigan plays defense, and then the way they can score as well, I just don't see them having any issues out of Texas Southern. LSU and St. Bonaventure, I think, is a very interesting matchup because St. Bonaventure is a really good team. That is probably one of the more underrated teams in the country, not even just in the tournament, but I think one of the most underrated teams in the country. They have a really, really good starting lineup. They all average double digits. They play great defense. I think they win this game versus LSU. But LSU is interesting because LSU has 3 guys on their team that can take over a game. You got Javonte Smart, you got Cam Thomas, and then you got Trenton Watford. All 3 of those guys can give you 30 in any game. So I do think that makes LSU interesting. That makes LSU an interesting choice to win that game, but I just don't see them playing enough defense to stop St. Bonaventure from moving forward. So I think St. Bonaventure moves forward out of that game to face Michigan. And then that's kind of when things get interesting. But I'll keep moving down through this bracket and kind of seeing what else we have there. But I do think St. Bonaventure will be a good matchup for Michigan, especially if they don't have Livers. I think they could give them trouble. I feel like I've said that about every 8-9 matchup, but we've had some really good 8-9 matchups. And spoiler alert, I won't say that about the last 8-9 matchup. I think Gonzaga runs through whoever wins that game. But back to this East bracket. Colorado, Georgetown. Colorado's a good team. I like McKinley Wright. I think he's done a lot of good for Colorado. Anytime you pass Chauncey Billups in any record, I think you're doing a good job. So I like them as a team. I think Georgetown's really hot right now. I think that run they made through the Big East tournament was huge. I don't know how great of a team they are, but they made a lot of threes on that run that they had. So I don't anticipate them, just making a huge deep run. But I don't see Colorado as being that great. And this is probably my bias. I'm not a huge Pac-12 guy this year. I think the Pac-12 is okay. I don't think that it was seeded outright. I think Oregon's the best team, and they'll probably be the best out in the NCAA tournament. So I actually want to pick Georgetown for that upset, that 12-5 upset. So, you have to pick a few of those. I do think I want to take Georgetown in that game. Shout out to Patrick Ewing, what he's doing with that program, getting them back to the tournament. So I think Georgetown moves forward in that. I talked a little bit about Florida State earlier. Florida State's taking on UNC Greensboro. UNC Greensboro is becoming one of those teams that we see every year in the tournament. They keep on knocking on the door. I remember a few years back they gave – I can't remember if that was Tennessee when Tennessee was good. I can't remember if that was Tennessee. I don't know if that was Tennessee or not. But they gave somebody a run as a lower seed, and I think I can see them, doing the same thing. Florida State's just they're a stalwart right now. They're one of the better programs in the country, one of the best programs in the ACC. I don't see them losing. I think they win this game. But UNC Greensboro's one they're building a little tournament brand. They're here every year just about, and they'll get their upset soon. I think they will pull their upset soon. I just don't see it being this year. I like Florida State a lot. It's the tallest team in the country. They're going to come out and compete. They know how to win. So I do think Florida State wins that one. And then moving to this BYU matchup. So actually, as I'm recording this Michigan State and UCLA game is finishing up in overtime right now. I thought Michigan State actually was going to make a decent run in this tournament, but UCLA is about to knock them out. So it's actually kind of crazy. I didn't see Izzo losing in this matchup. I thought that Michigan State will pull this matchup out. Probably not a good start for the Big Ten. Michigan State should be pretty battle tested. I thought they were a little bit better team, but I guess it proves that UCLA came out and did what they were supposed to do. I think this changes this matchup a little bit for me because I don't think BYU's a bad team. I just didn't think they were a great team, and I thought Michigan State probably will figure out a way to beat them. UCLA is going to have a little bit of momentum coming into this game, though. So that game could be a toss-up. That's another one of those 11-6s. that you just don't really know with the big brand. And, you get a little bit of talent disparity. BYU pretty much, they gave Gonzaga a run for their money, but they were kind of up and down team, inconsistent as well this year. So we could see that be a slugfest as well. I really thought that Michigan State would be this team. I actually thought they would get past BYU and probably past Texas as well if Texas wins that game against Abilene Christian. So that's a little bit different. That's interesting. So I guess we'll see how that game goes. As far as picking it, I think just with the momentum from the first four and winning a game like this in overtime, UCLA will be coming in pretty confident, pretty hot. I'll go ahead and take UCLA in that one. I'll stick to my guns. I was picking Michigan State in that, and they got taken out by this UCLA team. So I'll go ahead and pick UCLA in that one, even though I've watched them a decent amount this year, and I don't think that they're a super great team. I don't see them making a deep run, but I do think they can beat that BYU team. And so now we get into a little bit more of where I see some of that chaos coming from. Texas and Abilene Christian. These are two teams in the same state, and Abilene Christian, they always play every good team in Texas. They play great teams every year at the beginning of the year. I don't know about you guys, but you can just watch the ticker in the first few weeks of college basketball, and Abilene Christian's losing to somebody. But I think that prepares them really well, because what happened with this Abilene Christian team is that they did the same thing this year, and then they went on a tear in their conference. And they won a lot of games, and they played really well. I could see this being a team that gives Texas a run and maybe even beats them. That Southland Conference has been pesky in the tournament. If you guys remember, Stephen F. Austin actually had a little run there where they were giving folks troubles as well. And I think Stephen F. Austin, I think that was West Virginia that they beat, another Big 12 team. But anyway, I think if I had to pick a 14-3 upset, I think this is the one. Texas is a good team. I don't think that they play up to their potential. They have a lot of talent on that team. They have one seed type of talent on that Texas team. I don't think that they fully play up to their potential. I don't fully think that Shaka Smart puts them in positions to be great all the time. I'm not a super big believer in Shaka Smart. I think that this season will probably, buy him a couple of more years in Austin. I know he was on the hot seat coming in, but I think this season is probably just more about the experience he has on that team. And a lot of these guys just playing for their college basketball lives. I mean, you got Coleman on that team. You got Ramey, Andrew Jones, a cancer survivor. You got Jericho Sims on that team. I really think that they have a lot of talent. Let's not forget Brown. They're super freshman. I think he's projected to be a first-round pick as well. And then Josh Febris, I think he just came back in recently or at the beginning of the year, but he just made impact in a recent game. So that team is super, super loaded, and they haven't played up to it this year. And I can see that being the 14-3 matchup. So I'll call that as probably my most likely pick for a 14-3 matchup. I wouldn't doubt it happening. Like I said, that Abilene Christian team, they always schedule really, really tough games at the beginning of the year. They do get beat up, and they get beat up on a little bit and play some tough games. I think they actually played. I'm looking at their schedule now because I want to get a little bit better look at this, because I did look at it not too long ago. So they actually played Texas Tech really, really tough. They lost to Texas Tech by 7. They lost to Arkansas by 13 at Arkansas as well. And then they kind of went on a tear, like I said, through their conference. So I think this is a team that can make some noise, at least in that first round. I don't see them making it past the round of 32. But if I had to pick a 14-3 upset, it's this one. So I guess for the fun of it, let me just pick them. Let me pick Abilene Christian to go over Texas in that game, which is going to be interesting. It'll be a 14-11 matchup, which, those are always fun in the tournament. You get those double-digit seed matchups in the second round. So moving on, though, we'll come back to that 14-11 matchup, because that one will be interesting, because one of those teams will be in the Sweet 16 with a chance to go even deeper. So we got Connecticut, Maryland. Maryland's well coached. Maryland's a good team. They got some talent on that team. It's just, does anybody pick against UConn in March, until they run into a buzzsaw? I mean, it's hard to. We know what they do when the tournament starts. We know how many times we've seen them look down and out, and then the calendar flips to March, and then they just become the best team in the country. So I'm not betting against them. They'll have the best player on the court in most games that they play. James Bouknight is a baller. That dude can play. I'm not betting against UConn in this. So I do think that they have a good team that came on at the right time. I know Book Knight struggled with injuries throughout the season as well. So let me take a look, because I'm pretty sure they're in the. Oh, no. UConn's in the Big East. Why am I thinking they're in the American? So UConn's in the Big East. I think they were in the American for a quick second there, but then they went back home where they belonged. They've had some tough games against Creighton. They lost in a close one, but then I think they actually ended up losing to them in a close one again in the Big East tournament. So I think they lost by 3 in that game as well. That their toughest losses are against really good teams. I think that UConn's prime for another run. I do think they'll beat Maryland. I think they'll make it to the round of 32, and then kind of from there we'll just have to kind of see what kind of damage they can do. So I'll pick that game. And then Alabama, Iona. So I've been talking up this potential 2-15 upset the whole time. Every region I've talked about that I do think there's one that's most likely, and this is the one that I think is most likely. And it's not just because I don't think Alabama's good. I actually think Alabama's a really good team. I think Nate Oates is a really good coach. I think what he's doing there is awesome, and I think what they have there is awesome. I like what they've put together. I like the way they play. They're a fun team to watch. They shoot a lot of threes. You're going to make enough to keep you in any game. So I like the way that they play. I like the way that they play defense. I really like Herb. I like Herb Jones, SEC Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. A really, really good player. I like Shackelford. I think he's a sophomore guard for the team as well. John Petty's a vet. They got some good players, and they got a good team. But Iona has Rick Pitino as their coach, and I know everybody's not going to have the same idea of Rick Pitino, but he's getting that team hot at the right time, and they play like a Pitino team. They play defense, and they play scrappy. And I think that's something that'll probably make this the most likely 15-2 upset. I think that this is the most likely one. So if I had to pick one, I would pick it. Am I going to pick it in my bracket? No. But if I had to pick one, I'll come back here and brag about it if it happens. But I don't have the guts enough to actually pick it in my bracket. But I do think that's the most likely 15-2 upset out of all of the matchups, just because it's kind of a perfect storm. And I know I don't even think Iona won their conference, but they did get hot down the stretch. Kind of started playing how Pitino wants them to play. And to win that tournament in his first year, it just kind of lets you know kind of what kind of coach he is. And I think, like I said before, the coaching cream is going to rise to the top. These are two of the better coaches in the country. Rick Pitino is one of the best coaches of all time in college basketball. Nate Oates is a really, really good coach. I think he's going to build something great at Alabama. I just think that, this year that matchup with Pitino and the 2-15 with the pressure, and Alabama not used to kind of being that type of seed, I think it could lend itself to something interesting. So that's why I picked that as the most likely. I think if Alabama does win that game, I can see Alabama coming out of this bracket all the way. I actually think if they do win that game, they do come out of this bracket all the way, even though there will be some chaos elsewhere. Like I said, with that matchup, that could cause a lot of chaos. You got UConn coming through there, Abilene Christian as an upset. You got an 11-14 game right there. You got a 7-15 game if Iona actually does pull off that upset. And then you also have that tough, scrappy St. Bonaventure's team going up against Michigan, which I also think is, like I said before, between Michigan and Baylor, one of those two teams aren't making it to the second weekend. And they both have tough matchups. The brands aren't quite there for the teams Michigan are going to play, but either one of those teams could make it tough on them. So I would say coming out of this region, let me give a couple options here, because I think if Alabama does win that game over Iona, I actually think they come out of this region. I think they win this region, because I don't think Michigan makes it to the second weekend. So I think that, you have a lot of chaos there. You got a 12 seed and a 4 seed. I think Florida State's probably my second pick to come out. If that were to happen, if Florida State comes out on the top and Alabama comes out on the bottom, I think that's a heck of a game. It's a heck of a matchup. And I think Alabama probably ends up winning that game. I just like that. If they're in that game, that means that they're doing what they want to do right, and they're probably a little bit more offensively talented than Florida State. So Florida State's got some wings. They got some guys that can make it tough on you. It's the tallest team in the country, like I said. So they can make it tough. I see Florida State and Alabama probably ending up running out of there because a lot of other crazy things happen. You got Florida State getting to play Georgetown and then potentially St. Bonaventure or LSU if that upset happens, like I think it will. with Michigan in the second round. So, I mean, Florida State's just got to play their game and be who they've been all season, and they'll be in the Elite Eight with two fairly easy games to win. Now, Alabama, UConn, that's a tough one. I could easily see UConn winning that game. I could see UConn winning any game in any March tournament. It's just kind of one of those things. And then also down there with UCLA and Abilene Christian, kind of with that pick that I made. I mean, now you see one of the bigger brands in college basketball, UCLA. I'm pretty sure they beat Abilene Christian and make the Sweet 16. So this bracket is wide open. I think this bracket is probably the most likely to have some crazy chaos going on. If I had to make my final pick, it's really, really close for me between Alabama and Florida State, but I'll pick Alabama. I think I like that Alabama team. Now, if Alabama does end up losing Iona, though, I think that could be possible, then I think you could see UConn playing against Florida State in that Elite Eight game. Because you see, UConn will play Iona. I think they can win that game. I don't know if Iona's going to catch fire enough to make a deep run as a 15, but I do think UConn could be in the Elite Eight. And so I think that Alabama comes out if they win their first game. If Alabama doesn't win their first game, you probably see Leonard Hamilton and Florida State in his first Final Four. So either one of those stories is awesome. I like both of those guys as coaches. I just think this is the bracket where we can see some crazy stuff happening. And so I think that's a bracket to watch for those of you guys that are looking for something like that, looking for the storylines on the Cinderellas, looking for some of those fun things that we can do with the brackets, some of the brackets that we can bust up. Now that there's going to be a bracket that's absolute chaos. It always is. So, I think this East bracket is the bracket that's most likely to end up being that. So I like that. I like that Florida State Alabama Elite Eight matchup. It's more of a toss up for me. It's really, really tough to pick. I'll pick Alabama if those two play. Florida State plays anybody else in that game, I'll take Florida State in the Final Four. Most likely Cinderella coming through here. I guess it'll have to be, if you want to count UConn as a 7 seed as a Cinderella, you can count UConn as a 7 seed. If you want me to take a little bit higher seed, I'll probably say UCLA. UNC Greensboro's a dark horse. I just don't know how likely it is that UNC Greensboro beats Florida State. Florida State's kind of a machine right now, so I don't know how likely it is they beat them, but I do think that they could give them a run. So I say the most likely is UCLA, and then, of course, UConn as that 7 seed as well. Last but not least, let's hop into this West bracket where the Gonzaga looms large. I don't know if there's going to be even 10 to 15% of brackets that don't have Gonzaga in the Final Four. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they end up there unless something catastrophic happens. All right, so let's hop into this. We know I'm going to pick Gonzaga over Norfolk State. They may win that game by 40 points. Gonzaga is really that good of a team. Or anybody listening that doesn't follow college basketball, that, we're used to seeing those number one overall seeds go down, and we see that quite often. And that's not to say it's not impossible, because that is not possible, that they go down. It's possible that they lose. It is. But it's very, very, very unlikely. I've watched a lot of Gonzaga this year. I watch a lot of college basketball every year. I have not seen a team that I think is even in the same tier as Gonzaga this year. Gonzaga has 3 bona fide NBA players, probably 4, and they've got 3 of the best, 8 to 10 players in the country, and Jalen Suggs, Joel Ayayi, and Corey Kispert. That's a really, really good team. I haven't seen a team be this far apart probably since 2015 Kentucky. And they did end up losing in the Final Four. So it's not to say that it's not possible, like I said before, but Kentucky pretty much walked to the Final Four. I know they had the game winner in there with the twin, the Harrison twin and all of that. But that's March, but they still made that run and they still did what they had to do. They eventually lost to that really experienced, really good Wisconsin team that not a lot of people talked about until it was too late. And Kentucky found out that was a really good team. But I do think that Gonzaga is that good. So anybody doubting them or anybody that hasn't watched, I suggest you tune into them, man. It's not often that you get to see a team that's dominant in college. And I know, they play in the West Coast Conference. It's not a good conference. They really haven't played a top-tier competition in a while since the non-conference schedule. But that team is still good, man. They walked through that conference without even breaking a sweat. And that just kind of solidified it, man. That team is good. Gonzaga's good. So I see Gonzaga winning that game. Oklahoma, Mizzou. I've watched Mizzou a little bit. I know Mizzou started really, really strong. I think they even knocked on the door of the top 10, if not cracked the top 10 at one point this year. And then I know they lost Tillman, and it kind of unraveled a little bit for them. I thought they were probably playing a little bit above their heads anyway. They do have some vets. I think they've got a lot of juniors and seniors on that team. I know it's an experienced team. I think OU probably wins that game, though. They're a little bit more battle tested coming out of the Big 12. They got some good players. I do know OU will be missing Davion Harmon. He's one of their microwave type scorer guys. He can impact the game in a few different ways. But Oklahoma's going to defend. They're going to play hard. I think that's a good team. They reeled a little bit down the stretch, but I think they got tired. I think they were the first team ever to beat, 3 top 5 teams in a week or a month or something crazy. Like they did go on a crazy tear for a little while there, and they probably got tired a little bit. They probably played a little bit above their heads too, just kind of regressed to the mean, but I think they'll have enough to beat Mizzou. So, and that probably is a little bit of my KU bias as well. But I'd be fair to Mizzou if they were good enough, I think, to beat OU. But I think OU wins that one. So getting into this next pot of games, which is Creighton, UC Santa Barbara, and Virginia, Ohio. At least one of those 2 games is going to be an upset, and I wouldn't be surprised if both games are an upset. I think one of those games is more about the Creighton UC Santa Barbara game. It's a little bit more about Creighton, and that I don't think that Creighton is as good as probably they've shown a lot through the year. And then the Virginia Ohio game is about Ohio and probably having the best player on the court in Jason Preston. Jason Preston's a baller. If you haven't watched him play, you should look up his highlights. He's a legit NBA prospect, legit player. The dude can ball. He's a triple-double walking. He walks in the gym and drops one. He can score from all 3 levels. Just a good player. And they also have a lot of other guys that score in double digits as well. I can't remember if it was 5 or 6. They have 5 or 6 guys that score in double digits. A lot of this starts to run together. I do a lot of research on a lot of the NCAA tournament teams. So if I mess up some of these stats, you guys can reach out to me. I'll give you my email or something to correct me. I'll probably post this on YouTube. You can tell me in the comments, but I know I'm butchering some of this. It tends to run together at times, but I still kind of want to throw it out there for the ones that I think I remember. So, and I believe Ohio has 5 or 6 guys that score in double digits per game, which means they got a lot of guys that can light it up. But Jason Preston is impressive. I believe they almost beat Illinois early. I think it was a really, really close game. I didn't actually watch that game, but I did watch the highlights, and I think a lot of the post-game analysis was kind of people thinking that, Ohio kind of gave that game to Illinois, and that was also at a different time. Illinois got beat pretty bad by Baylor early in the year, and I think they're probably better than Baylor now, but still, that Illinois team's good. They're a national championship contender, and for Ohio to hang with them in their building, it's a big deal. And so I think Jason Preston had a triple-double in that game as well against the triple-double king Ayo. So Ayo Dosunmu, who I think is probably the most deserving player of the year candidate this year. I really like him and his game, but I know Luka's going to get it, and he deserves it as well. So I'm not mad at it, but I do like Ayo Dosunmu as well. I don't know, man. I think that this little pod right here, that could be a fun pod because I could see both of those. I know Creighton actually statistically is one of their best defenses, I think, under McDermott. So I know that they play a little bit of defense, but also they aren't that great of an offensive team, I would say. I don't think they get to their buckets as much as they would like to. I do like Zagorowski. I think he's a good player. I believe he was the preseason player of the year in that conference? I'd have to double check that, but I know he was a preseason all Big East player for sure. He's a good player. He can score with the best of them. But I do think that UC Santa Barbara could give them some trouble. They won a lot of games in a row earlier. I don't think they played a lot of great teams this year. Their point guard, I believe his name is McLaughlin. McLaughlin, I think, is the point guard for Santa Barbara. That could be the point guard for one of these other Cinderella teams, but I'm almost certain that's the point guard for Santa Barbara. He can play. He's a really good player. They've only lost 4 games, and I think they've only lost 1 game since December, so that would mean they didn't lose any games in 2021 so far. So we'll see. what that turns out to be. Another note about Santa Barbara as well that's coming back to me now. I think they have transfers from like a lot of other programs. Like I think they had a transfer from Oregon State. DePaul, I think, is a transfer on their team as well. They've got some transfers from some teams in Power 5 conferences. So these guys aren't going to be as overwhelmed talent-wise or as intimidated talent-wise. So I could see both of those games being upsets. If I had to pick one that was more likely, I'd probably say UC Santa Barbara over Creighton, just because I think Creighton's probably a little bit more prone to the upset. Virginia's the defending champ. They've been here every year now. Tony Bennett's built something really good there, and I think that they do fine. I think that Virginia does just fine in that game. But it's a chance that Jason Preston just comes out, goes nuclear, and they do beat Virginia. So I'm not ruling that out, especially since as far as their perimeter defense this year, I think Virginia's been a little bit down from what we normally expect to see from the Hoos. So I would say if you want a pod to watch, that's the pod to watch. That Creighton, UC Santa Barbara, Virginia, Ohio, both of those games are ripe for upset. Let's not forget Virginia's coming off a COVID pause. They haven't played. I think they're just getting into Indiana, just getting into Indy on Friday. I know they play Saturday, and I think they're getting in Friday. I don't think they're going to have a whole lot of time there in the bubble before they play. So that could affect them. It could not affect them. There's a lot of variables in both of those games, though. So I guess in that, I think the Creighton UC Santa Barbara, why I think that's likely is that I don't fully believe in Creighton. I think Creighton's been playing a little over their head, but I do think they have some good players on that team. Mitch Ballock's from right up the road from where I live now in Olathe. So shout out to him and Eudora High. But I do think that Creighton's a little bit over their heads. I think they're right for an upset. Virginia, just kind of with everything going on around them, the struggles to score sometimes. The reliance on the threes, that's not something that they always have. You know, they don't always rely on the threes, but they do rely on the threes a decent amount this year. And then also just Ohio being pretty good. Ohio's a pretty good team, and they'll have the best player on the court in Preston, a legitimate NBA player. So I do think that those two are right for it. If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Santa Barbara to beat Creighton and Virginia to beat Ohio in a really, really tough game. But don't be surprised if we get a 12-13 in around the 32, which I think is always fun to give one of those double-digit seeds a chance to make the second weekend. And when you get a guarantee in that, you can just sit back and watch the game and be excited about it. So, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing it. I just know Virginia's been building. Virginia's been doing really good this year. Over the last few years with Tony Bennett, he's built something great. Defending champs, of course. I know it's been a while since that happened, but they are the defending champs. So they'll play with some pride. They'll come out and they'll play hard. So I probably wouldn't fully pick them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did lose as well. USC Drake. If you guys didn't see that Drake-Wichita State game, you missed a good one. That game was awesome. It came down to the very last shot. Wichita State made a huge shot before that last shot. It was a fun game to watch. I've actually watched Drake a decent amount this year in the Missouri Valley. They started off the season like wildfire. That team can play. They ended up, dealing with some injuries, dealing with some COVID stuff, kind of slowed down their momentum. Seems like they've picked up the steam back a little bit. I think they were even close to being ranked at one point during this year. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure Drake might have crept in or might have been close to creeping into the top 25 out of the Missouri Valley. They were the story out of that conference for the beginning of the season, and then kind of they faded a little bit, and then Loyola became the story. Deservedly so. That's a good team as well, Loyola. But I think the Missouri Valley is a little bit better than people think, and I think Drake's prepared. I think Drake's ready to play. USC's a good team, not a great team. They have a really, really good interior presence with Evan Mobley and his brother Isaac, I believe his name is. Their guard plays a little inconsistent. They will play defense. Evan Mobley's going to be the best player on the court in just about every game he plays in this tournament. That dude's a bona fide player. I think if I had the number 2 pick in the draft, I probably would draft him if I needed a big guy. I like his game. He seems like he's got potential to stretch it as well out to the 3-point line. I can see USC with Evan Mobley, winning a couple games in this. And I know that sounds crazy to say for me being a KU fan, but I can see that if they were to win this game against Drake. There's something about that first 4 momentum, though. I think this will be a good game. I think Drake's going to come out excited to play. I think they're going to come out with some momentum. I think they're going to come out pretty hot. especially with the way that they finished that game. They had to fight. They had to fight through that. If I had to pick it though, that's a tough one. I would have liked to see the all Kansas matchup, of course, with Wichita State in there, but Drake definitely earned their way in that game today. That's a tough 11-6 matchup to pick. My gut's telling me to pick Drake. For some reason, I'm fighting that back, but I'll go ahead and pick Drake in this. So I'll pick Drake in that game. 11-6 upset in that one. I think I've picked a whole lot of 11-6 upsets. For some reason, it seems like that might just be the matchup I'm looking at this year as like the ones that are going to just cause problems, I guess. I think Texas Tech might have been the only 6 seed I picked. You guys can remind me if I'm right or not, and I'll hear that when I go back and listen. But I do like that upset in that game. Wouldn't be surprised if USC won that game. And if USC won that game, I wouldn't be surprised if they're playing on the second weekend. So I think that game actually probably means a decent amount in this bracket for what it's going to look like. But I'll pick Drake in that. I'll stick to my guns. I'll pick Drake. KU Eastern Washington. I'll get back into this a little bit more towards the end, but I do think Kansas wins that game. So I'll move Kansas forward in that. And then Oregon VCU. I like Oregon's team this year coming out of the Pac-12. I think they were the best team in the Pac-12, at least that I watched. You know, Dana does a pretty good job there on his team just about every year. They're a little bit more up and down. He usually has to kind of build up a class and get some guys to be upperclassmen, and then they kind of become a good team again and kind of be a national contender. But I do think that's a good team. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I do think VCU beats them. VCU is a heck of a defensive team. One of the best defensive teams by numbers in the country, if I'm not mistaken. Really, really good team. Well coached, play hard. Deshaun Highland's a walking bucket. I've watched him play a few times. That dude can fill it up from anywhere on the court. So I like him a lot. They got a couple of other shooters on the team. I think Williams is the best shooter on the team, if I remember right from watching them. That dude can play too. He can shoot really well, and I think he averages in double digits as well. So good team, VCU. I think they win that first round matchup over Oregon. And then Iowa Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's actually building something decent there. I think that's Bryce Drew, if I'm not mistaken. Bryce Drew's the coach at Grand Canyon. He's built a little momentum up with that team. I do think Iowa beats them, and I'm not fully sold on Iowa as a team. I think Iowa's a little bit overrated as well. I really like Luka Garza as a player. I think he's one of the best college players we've seen in a decent amount of time. He just goes out there and he plays hard, he gets buckets, and he wins games. So I think Iowa wins that game pretty easily. But like I said, I'm not fully sold on Iowa, as you guys heard me say before, and we'll kind of see how that shakes out in the rest of this bracket. But I think coming out of this bracket, you guys have any mystery of who it was going to be, it's going to be Gonzaga. I'm picking Gonzaga to come out of this bracket. That's a good team. It's a great team. One of the best teams I remember seeing over the last at least 10 years in college basketball. It's a really, really good team, especially at least since the 2015 Kentucky team is the best team I remember watching. So I'm picking Gonzaga to come out of this bracket. If I had to pick a potential Cinderella team, like I said, VCU, man, they defend. I think VCU's a good pick. And then, like I said before, some other double-digit seeds to watch, Santa Barbara and Ohio. If either one or one of those teams win, they might have a decent shot at making it to the Sweet 16. So those are my two upsets. I guess I cheated in this one, but my two potential Cinderella teams, I probably say are those two teams. So before I make my KU Eastern Washington portion of this, and I kind of get into the looking at the Jayhawks game, I will just go ahead and announce who my Final Four is. You guys should know by now, just kind of from where I picked that, but I'll announce my Final Four, and then I'll pick who my champ's going to be. So I got Gonzaga coming out of the West. Is the last one I picked. I did reluctantly pick Alabama. I'm still on the fence about that Alabama-Florida State matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if Florida State won it, but I'll go ahead and put Alabama in there in the Final Four. I've got Illinois coming out of the Midwest, and then out of the South, I picked Ohio State coming out of the South. I'm pretty sure. I think that was my pick. So I got 2 1s and 2 2s coming out of there. So we'll have Gonzaga and Alabama in the Final Four. I'm taking Gonzaga in that one. They probably win that game by double digits. They've only had one game that was within double digits all season. So I'm pretty sure that the tournament probably looks kind of similar to that for them. So I do think they probably beat Alabama by double digits, and Alabama's a really good team. But that just speaks to what I think about Gonzaga. That's a great team. And then you got that Ohio State matchup over there with Illinois. I'm taking Illinois in that one. I do think Ohio State could give them some trouble. They could stretch out Kofi with E.J. Liddell as that stretch five. But Illinois is just a good team. They've proven they can win a lot of different ways, and I think they're probably the second best team in the country right now, and they've been playing like it. So I think it's Illinois, Gonzaga in the national championship game. It's super chalky, but I got to take Gonzaga, man. I just can't see myself picking against them officially. I would love to see my Jayhawks make a run, of course, but I can't see myself picking against Gonzaga, and I think a lot of people probably feel the same way that have actually watched a lot of college basketball this year, watched a lot of different teams, and just kind of know how good Gonzaga really is. That is a really, really good team. It's been a long time since I remember a team this good. I really believe that. So Gonzaga's going to probably win the national championship this year. If they don't, it'll be a surprise to just about everybody in the country who follows college basketball. But that's March Madness, you know. It wouldn't surprise me, you know. I would be shocked they didn't, and I think it would suck for them because I think they are that good of a team, and I think they deserve to validate their season with the championship. But would it surprise anybody if they did lose? I mean, it's called March Madness for a reason. Another team could get their one shining moment opportunity and knock Gonzaga off. So we'll see how it all plays out. But for right now, you guys have my pick of Gonzaga. When they lose in the Sweet 16 or the round of 32, you guys can all write on the YouTube or email me and let me know that I was dead wrong. But just about everybody else that probably writes me or emails me probably had Gonzaga in their bracket as well. But anyway, so that's kind of my look at the tournament. We'll keep moving through as games get played. I will analyze some of the wins, some of the losses, look at some of the potential matchups down the road as the tournament keeps going. So this won't be the last of the tournament. This will probably be the longest that I spend on the tournament in any podcast. I will kind of take some time in each one, kind of going forward every day and just giving my thoughts on what's going on in it, giving my thoughts on who I think is going to win as the brackets update and some of the matchups that we see. So, and then I'll review some of my crazy picks and different things like that. So I think it'll be fun for us to get this going and just kind of see March Madness back. I'm happy for it. So for those of you guys that aren't kind of looking for that local flavor and you don't really care that much about the Kansas Jayhawks, I'm about to hop in reviewing their game probably here for 5 to 10 minutes or so before I wrap the podcast up. So if you guys want to hop out, that's great. Thank you for hanging in here with me for this long. I'm a long-winded guy. You guys will find that out. I like to talk sports. I love to talk sports, actually. I mean, I can talk about sports all day. So these podcasts probably won't be short. I'll give you a lot of content to listen to, and that probably means some of you guys won't finish, but I'm glad you guys are here still. I appreciate you for listening to my first episode. I definitely will appreciate any feedback you guys have. sasports913@gmail.com is my email if you have anything to say. I'll set up an SA Sports YouTube page, and I'll post these out on YouTube as well with some audio. So I'll also put them out there for you guys to comment and let me know what you think about them on there as well. So for now, you know, I'm kind of just now getting started. I'll get some social media stuff going here in the coming days, coming weeks, so you guys can give me some feedback on it as well. But for now, mostly email and then probably YouTube coming as well in the coming days as I start to upload more of these. So sasports@gmail.com for you guys hopping out. Thank you so much for hanging with me on my first episode. And then all of my KU folks and my local people, let's hop into this game with KU and Eastern Washington. So we all know that KU's had a lot going on over these last couple of weeks, kind of starting with the positive test of David McCormick, and it's just kind of snowballed into a lot of other issues. And I think for a lot of KU fans, that was pretty gut-wrenching. At least it was for me to watch them play as well as they did in that first half against Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma made a run in the second half, but I guess that was kind of expected. I expected Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a good team. Like I've said, you know, before in the podcast, Oklahoma's not a bad team. They lost some steam down the stretch of the season, but that's a good team with some vet guys on it. Austin Reeves is a really good player, a first-team all-conference player. Brady Manick's a good player. He seems like he's been around for 10 years. He came in with Trae Young. I think Trae Young's basically an NBA vet now, which is it's kind of crazy, but we've been watching Brady Manick play for a while. So that's a good team. To watch us, you know, without Dave, without Tristan and Aruna play as well as we did against OU, I thought that was great. I thought that was something that they could build on in the Big 12 tournament. And after that game, I pretty much had confidence KU could win that tournament. Even against Baylor without David McCormick, I think it would force them to change their identity or force them to play a different way, and it would force them to play DeJuan Harris a lot more, who I think has a lot bigger impact on the game than the stat sheet, and I think he makes great things happen when he's on the court. So I like him a lot. Getting into this matchup though. First of all, I hope the team doesn't come out rusty. That's an option. I mean, they've come out rusty and slow in games where they didn't have COVID stuff going on before. So we'll see how they come out. I can see them starting slow. I can see this game being close halfway through the first half, 5 minutes left in the first half, it being within 6 or 7 points or even closer. I can see that. The thing about Eastern Washington, though, is I'm knocking on whatever was around me. It's not a great three-point shooting team. They actually play through the post. They play through the bigs. Their big is 6'9". Groves, he ended up being the player of the year in the conference. He's a really, really, really good player. I've watched the Big Sky championship game. I like Groves a lot. The interesting thing about this team is that their six-man Perry, he actually was the preseason player of the year in the Big Sky. So I think that was kind of interesting to see that he kind of reverted to the bench. And then Groves ended up kind of becoming the player of the year in the conference. But this is a team not to sleep on. I think Kansas should win this game. I don't think there's a lot. I mean, you can throw out the COVID thing and, all of that. But, I think at this point, Kansas should expect to win their first game every year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of excuses or sympathy given out if they lose this game. But I do think they should win it. I think we see a more urgent Marcus Garrett. I think we see a more focused Marcus Garrett in this game. I think we end up seeing Marcus Garrett play on Groves a decent amount. And then when they play Perry off the bench, I think we could see Perry coming in and Marcus Garrett kind of getting his shot at him as well. Or, a combination of Marcus Garrett on Groves, DeJuan Harris on Perry. But I think our defense will frustrate this team. Kansas, they bring their defense everywhere. That's the one thing about this team that I think could propel them to a run. I don't know if it's likely this year. They just don't have enough offensive firepower to make a super deep run, I think, in the tournament. I'd say ultimately, depending on that matchup in the round of 32, I could even potentially see USC giving us trouble and maybe even sending us home. But we'll get there when we get there. I will follow KU through the whole tournament. So this Eastern Washington game, I think, is interesting. I think it'll be a fun game to watch. And I think the way that they play 5 out a lot of the time, I think it actually might suit us a little better that David McCormick will be limited in this game. David McCormick struggles a little bit to move his feet out on the perimeter, defensively, which is why we had to pretty much adjust the whole defensive scheme with how we were playing ball screens from the beginning of the year. And that was really what triggered the defensive improvement that we saw down the stretch of the season. So I think having McCormick limited may be a blessing in disguise for this team. And he needs this one game to get up to speed, but he's got to get up to speed and get ready for the next one because either Drake with their big guy down low, I can't recall his name right now, but he's a load, or USC with Mobley, we're going to need all the size we can get. So Mitch Lightfoot should have a pretty good opportunity in this game to prove that he's ready to play. And, of course, he's starting to get momentum for next year, and he'll probably be here for another 6. But we'll get to that in the offseason and, joke around about Mitch Lightfoot and how long he's been here. But I think we'll get a chance to see him get some big minutes. Bill Self, I think he's going to give Tyon Grant Foster a chance. Tyon Grant Foster's from KCK, where I'm from. I think that'll be a good opportunity for him. He's gotten a few opportunities. He actually pretty much single-handedly won that North Dakota State game down the stretch by himself with his defensive effort, his rebounding. He got a few blocks down the stretch, and I think he even made a couple free throws and a big basket. So he's had a chance to make some impacts this year. He hasn't gotten a whole lot of opportunity since the early part of the season, which is kind of what we see out of Bill Self teams. He gives everybody a chance, and then the guys that prove they're going to do what he wants them to do and they're going to do the things that he thinks helps the team win, he's going to let them play more. So I do think that's a big question mark going into this game is what kind of role Tyon Grant Foster is going to have in this game and what kind of role he's going to have going forward throughout the tournament. I think both of those things are big questions and things to watch in this game. I can see him having a decent breakout game, getting some good minutes, getting his feet under him, and hopefully he gets some momentum. Christian Brown, Ochai Agbaji. Ochai seemed like he kind of broke out a little bit against OU. I'm not super worried about him. He's been consistent and steady. Christian Brown, I would like to see him shoot 10 threes in this game. As many threes as it takes to see him make some. He hasn't been shooting with confidence. He hasn't really been shooting open shots recently. So I think he's a big variable through this tournament. And he's been doing the little things. He's crashing the boards. He's giving it his all on defense. He doesn't always, have the athleticism sometimes to stay with some of his assignments, but I do think he gives it his all. He does the dirty work and goes after loose balls. He plays hard. So he deserves to be on the court even if he's not making shots. But, man, if he's making shots, does he make this team different? So I think if you get him to make a few shots down the stretch of this game, you get Ochai, kind of keep that momentum going for Ochai Agbaji. Marcus Garrett looked really confident offensively. If you can keep that confidence up offensively from him, you get DeJuan Harris handling some ball handling duties. I think you can kind of start to see a recipe for a run or a potential run, but you can definitely see the recipe for a win against Eastern Washington. I think Kansas will handle this game pretty well. If I had to pick a score, this isn't a high-scoring team, if you guys remember. I'd probably pick something between Kansas scoring in the low 70s. What's the spread on this game? I haven't actually looked at the spread today, so let me take a look at the spread real quick. The spread is 10.5. Kansas should probably cover that fairly easily. I see something along the lines of 72, 56 in that range. They've been doing a really good job of holding teams under 60 and 70 points. They pretty much make teams play the worst that they play all season. So I think Kansas gives Eastern Washington some trouble on the defensive end. And I think that they win this game pretty handily. They probably start slow. It's probably close until late in the first half. Kansas probably goes into halftime with the 7 or 8 point lead, and then they pull away at the end. We see that happen a decent amount in the tournament. So that's what I think for Kansas this year. I'll get into a little bit more of a potential run and things like that tomorrow. We'll look at some of the results of the NCAA tournament game. I do think Kansas has a chance to make a run in this tournament. I think that the path is there. I'm not a super big fan of Iowa. I think Kansas can actually beat Iowa. Iowa's a good offensive team. They're not a really good defensive team. Both of those things bode well for Kansas. Kansas is a really good defensive team. I think they could give Iowa some trouble. They don't have a whole lot of athleticism on their perimeter, so I think they could give them some trouble. Luka Garza is going to get his, of course, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I appreciate you guys for hanging in here with me and listening throughout this podcast, this first episode of the Something About Sports podcast. Like I said before, I'll get this posted up to YouTube. It's going to be a really long video, so it might be in pieces or kind of I'll figure that part out. But I know I'm going to post where podcasts go, and then if you guys have any inquiries, any questions, anything you want to suggest to me, go ahead and send them over to sasports913@gmail.com. That's where you can get me some feedback and some things that you like, some things you dislike, and what you think about it. I love to hear feedback. I love to hear what you guys think. So signing off for episode 1. This is Leon Edwards, host of Something About Sports Podcast. Thank you guys again for hanging in here with me, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.